who is here? Hi, Matt Sattel.
Jeremy.
Hey,
how's
buddy.
it going?
How are you?
Can I come in?
Yeah, sure. Come on in.
Yeah.
This is our suite.
Yeah, we don't have a suite, so I'm decided to crash.
No suite.
But I do have a mic.
No suite, no problem. All right.
Hey, Matt.
Hey,
Nicole, thanks.
nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. Come on in.
All right. Where do you want me?
If you just can join me on the sofa here.
All right.
So, it'd be great to start off if you could just give me a little bit of an intro to yourself and tell us, our fine audience, about you.
Yeah, Matt Sattel. So I'm the global CRO of OpenX. Been here about, actually, I think I just hit my 3 years like last week, or according to LinkedIn, I hit my 3 years a couple of...
Isn't it funny how it's like we don't know anything if it's not documented?
Oh, yeah. And prior to that, I was at MIQ. I did a couple stints at data companies like Samba, but been kind of in the general programmatic space for a while now.
That's awesome. Great. And so have you been to CES before?
I have been to CES many times.
Many times.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. So I'm going to take my cue from you because this is definitely my first rodeo here. But I'd love to hear what you're thinking about at OpenX for 2025. Like, paint me a big picture.
Yeah, I think we made a lot of changes over the last, call it 3 years, since that's all I can really speak to right now. But I think one of the big things is really putting a renewed emphasis on buyers' needs. So the way that we see it is the people with the money are the buyers. If we are driving revenue for publishers or working with DSPs, that's the best thing for the ecosystem. So a lot of the tools, a lot of the announcements, and a lot of the focus that we have in 2025 and what we really have been building towards over the last couple of years has put a big emphasis on how we can drive value back to the buyers, which again creates kind of that flywheel and the benefit to both the publishers and the DSP side too.
So talk to me a little bit about some of these things. Like, how do advertisers navigate through the noise, right? Like, how do you deal with things like SPO or curation, or how are you thinking about that? What does that mean?
Oh man, how long do we have? I could talk about this for a long time.
We got ages. No, we don't. We need a soundbite, please.
Okay, I'm great at soundbites.
I'm totally kidding. But just give us an idea of how OpenX is looking at those things.
Yeah, so I think there's a couple things. I come from like a bit of a unique background because I haven't spent 15 years on the SSP side. I really was heavily focused, especially at MIQ, on the buy side. And I ran our in-housing team there. So I was working with large global brands on how to drive programmatic in-house. Mm-hmm. So I think when I first started at MIQ, a lot of what I was focused on is like, what's the right DSP mix? How many DSPs are right? Are you buying from the right DSPs? And I think over time it shifted a lot to what's the value of working with SSPs. Mm-hmm. So I think the whole like curation is a buzzword that I've seen on LinkedIn every time I get on LinkedIn for the last couple months. I just don't get that because curation's been happening for a very long time. I think there's an evolution of what curation means. And for us at OpenX, it means data-driven curation. And but I think that there's a lot of education and some myths, I would say, around what curation actually means. So that was a focus of mine at MIQ for a while is true SPO.
True SPO. I think it's a tricky thing, isn't it? I have to ask you, did you have to hand in your passport when you came over to the dark side? Or what's the biggest change you see working with a company like MIQ and being focused on the advertiser side and then coming to a SSP and having to deliver value for an advertiser?
Yeah, it made me realize how much I didn't know about the economics of everything programmatic. Like you think and then you get deep into it with working with publishers in a very unique way, working with the DSPs in a completely different way than I was used to. So I'd say the biggest learning curve for me was actually admitting to myself that I knew less about programmatic than I thought I knew going into my experience at OpenX.
And what do you think is going to be on the learning curve this year?
Oh man, definitely privacy. But I think that's a learning curve for everybody, right? Like
Absolutely.
I think it's constantly evolving. I think if you look at things like what Australia and Maryland are doing right now, just with like children's-based content, it's constantly evolving. And I think for me, that's something that I am putting a lot of effort into. I'm going to 2025 to make sure I understand it, where I can educate my team, and then by proxy educating the rest of the marketplace.
Do you know what the letters GDPR mean?
I do.
Does it give you nightmares?
Being in a global world, yeah, it does.
Absolutely. And so what do you think that looks like for OpenX as you navigate through the US market?
Yeah, I think one, we recently promoted one of the best people at OpenX to Global Privacy Council. So her whole role is focused on the evolution of privacy for OpenX. We've also been heavily focused on this for a while. So we built an identity graph back in 2017, which actually has kind of required us to be pretty savvy when it comes to privacy. We have about 80 partners, data providers that have been utilizing our platform and utilizing our identity graph to push out their data to DSPs. So utilizing our pipes and our platform. So we've been pretty heavily focused on privacy for a while. In fact, I think what's exciting is that we don't look at it as much of a challenge, but we're looking at it more as like a differentiator for us, because we've been doing this kind of stuff for a while because of our heavy emphasis on data and identity since 2017.
So do you think like this is a year where like curation, identity, and privacy come together? Like, is that a fair statement, or how do you see?
I would actually say it different. I think it's the year where we start looking at consolidation and simplification of the programmatic ecosystem. So I think if you look at like what the average trader has to do and the number of platforms that they're logging into, like they're not working in one DSP. Rarely do I think a trader at like a large brand is working on one DSP. They're certainly not working with one data provider. They're also never working with one SSP.
Right.
So for me, I actually think it's around simplification, and that's why we've put a lot of our focus in 2025 into curation and allowing easy tools for buyers to be able to do data-driven curation, which I think is like Curation 2.0.
And so how do you see that solving the problem of working with too many partners? Like, how do you see simplification and curation solving the fragmentation, I guess?
Yeah, I think people have had to go to a bunch of different partners to do one thing, right? Like you might go to a data provider and say, hey, I want to activate ACR data, so I'm going to talk to Samba about that. Then they're going to go to their DSP partner, talk to them. It's a lot of what our emphasis has been. Again, I had mentioned earlier that we have about 80 data partners that are on our platform right now and utilizing our platform directly. 30 of those were actually new in 2024. So we have a huge emphasis on getting these data partners signed on. And I think we're creating a curation platform that for the first time, it's been utilized for years now from those data providers. They actually can go into a platform and create their own deals, pass it to the DSPs directly. We are now launching that for buyers as well. And more to come on that, because I think if I said any more,
just like a little teaser.
A little teaser, yeah. I think if I said any more, I'd get in trouble. But
I mean, what happens in Vegas.
Yeah. Well, I told you, if I can find out who Ad Tech God is, I will gladly give my secrets.
I'd have to check.
Where's Jeremy?
Yeah, it's like, Jeeves. I'd have to check with the big man about that one. Not ATG himself, but he might have a steer on it. No, fair enough. That's really interesting. So, what are you most excited about at CES then?
Yeah. I think just like seeing everyone that I haven't seen in quite a while is obviously exciting. But I think hearing what people's takes on AI is, I think it's been a big emphasis for us.
So what's the top tip for helping advertisers understand what they're actually looking for and not just vanity data, et cetera?
Yeah. So I've talked a lot about this, I think when the ANA report came out talking about MFA. And I think what's challenging is we can't make changes if everyone doesn't agree that KPIs have to change. So MFA exists, and it still exists, right?
Can you just explain MFA?
Made for advertising. So what that is are sites that pop up that are exclusively built to serve ads. So I think we've all clicked on something.
So like every time I see something that's like the top 20 list of like best hairstyles this year, is that MFA?
Yeah, and then you actually click on it. It has nothing to do with that, but there's
Correct.
47 ads on it. That's MFA. And I think they perform really well, right? Like if you look at vanity metrics, if you look at click-through rate, viewability, things like that, it performs really well.
They're kind of sexy, at least on the outset.
Yeah. But I think the moment you start optimizing to things like incrementality or a cost per incremental view, things like that, MFA doesn't have the power that it does right now. But I think for us as an SSP, we can't make that change on our own, right? DSP algorithms decide how something's going to get bought. And if it's optimizing to a vanity metric, then MFA is going to kind of pop up. But I also think a lot of agencies and buyers in general have been doing a great job long before that report came out. And that, I think, if we're talking about myths of, what was it, like 2 years ago?
Yes.
I think there was a myth that like MFA was everywhere. And I think there are certain agencies that were exclusively working with us, and let's call this what it is, curation, to say we only want to be buying these publishers, or we only want to be buying this type of supply. people have been doing that for a long time, way before an A&A report came out.
Yeah, I think MFA, there was some stat on the Marketecture podcast it's talking about like the, significant reduction. So that's really great that you guys are helping to highlight that and help our advertisers or help the advertisers.
I mean, within our platform, which again is in the hands of a lot of data providers right now and now buyers as well, it's a checkbox if you don't want MFA. And right now that's based off of the Jounce list, but you can also customize it if you have your own list as an advertiser. It can be uploaded into that. So we've put a lot of work into eliminating MFA if that is what ultimately is the decision of the buyer.
That's awesome. Any last thoughts on you had mentioned AI and curation, like any last thoughts on that you didn't get to share with us?
Yeah, I think I'll go back to kind of the myth that curation is new, right? Or that it's this like a thing that has just popped up overnight.
Well, why is it so popular now?
I think a lot of journalists wrote about it, if I'm being honest. I mean, listen, I think agencies have leaned into SSPs in new ways, which looks a lot like data and data being activated directly within SSP. It's also very heavily focused. If you were an agency person 5 years ago, you probably didn't have a relationship with your SSP, or if you did, maybe a couple COEs did. Right. But the average trader or buyer wasn't having day-to-day conversations with their SSP.
And you're seeing that change.
Yeah. So I think the roles within, and by the way, I'm very for the fact that we needed two-sided marketplaces. I think there's a huge role for DSPs, and I think there's a huge role for SSPs. I think there's no question of that. I don't think we go back to like the ad network days. However, I think that the roles and responsibilities across DSPs and SSPs will continue to evolve, and what buyers decide is best for how they want to activate is going to be how buyers activate. And for us, we provide the tools for if that's the decision they make, that we support that.
That's great. That's very insightful.
Yeah.
So I just have to ask you, if your company was a brand new emoji, what would it be? And you can actually feel free to draw it if that's easier. But
okay, I'll talk through it first. You just casually have some note cards here for me.
I just casually have some note cards and a pen. I hear you're a brilliant artist, so yeah, go on.
Yeah. So I'm not a big emoji person, so I'm not positive that this is not an emoji.
Okay, go on. Lay it on us.
But I would say for us, it would probably be an open book.
Ooh, that's a good one.
And I think for a couple reasons, I don't think 2025 is the year of curation, because I think the year of curation has been happening for a while. I think it's the year of transparency. And you asked questions about SPO. I think there's a lot of changes and some hard conversations that need to be happening around what true SPO is. And for us, we want to be able to provide that at the level of granularity. We want to be providing the data that people are looking for. So transparency is incredibly important for us. It's why we've done things like we've created a client advisory board where we get to ask people the real questions. Is this something you want? Is this something we're building just for us that you don't actually care about? So I think you'll see us being much more of an open book going into 2025. And I think, I'm trying to think of the nice way to say this, and maybe that doesn't matter.
No,
I think a lot of
forgo the niceties.
I look at a lot of press. There you go.
Yeah.
I look at a lot of press releases and stuff over the last, let's just say, year, and very rarely are they actually something new or interesting or something that's like new to market. It's just like that evolving, like, hey, I need to get another press release out. I'm going to put something out. So we're really heavily focused on making sure that we're putting out things that matter and things that are new, things that we're building that people should care about. And that to me, I think is like the best version of being an open book is like, we're not going to put out fluff. We're not going to be making announcements that like we've been running for 2 years. We're really going to be heavily focused on what actually is new and meaningful.
That's a great place to end this. That was.
I didn't draw it.
Great.
I didn't draw it. I'll draw it later for you, and then you guys can post it on your social.
Yeah, I was gonna say, that was such a good explanation. I feel like it would be kind of a letdown just to see the drawing now.
Yeah, so I can't follow it up with a bad drawing.
That was so illuminating. Yeah. But yes, but no, please do draw it for us, and we'd love to put it on our post. And thank you so much for being here today.
Yeah, thank you.
Good to chat to you.
Yeah, it's great.